300 motorcycles lined the street, engines rumbling low against the grey morning sky. Amanda pressed her face to the car window, certain she was seeing things. 3 salons had already turned her away. 3 times, someone had looked at her and decided she wasn't worth the trouble. Now, strangers in leather vests stood in rows on both sides of the sidewalk, holding signs with her name on them. Her mother's hands shook on the steering wheel. Nobody had told them this would happen. As the car door opened, a man removed his sunglasses and asked her one simple question, one she never thought she'd hear again after everything that had happened that month. The smell of cinnamon rolls drifted through Whitfield's Corner Bakery every Tuesday at 6 in the morning, and Amanda Whitfield was always the one to open the ovens. She moved through the small kitchen with a rhythm she had practiced for 4 years, sliding trays in and out, humming a song she had heard on the radio the night before. Her co-workers said she had the best hands in the shop, steady, patient, precise. Amanda liked precision. She liked knowing exactly what came next. She was 27 years old, with short brown hair that curled at the ends no matter how many times she brushed it flat, and a laugh that carried through the whole building when something struck her as funny. She had Down syndrome, a fact that had shaped parts of her life, but never defined the parts that mattered most to her. Her job, her friendships, her love of country music, and most of all, her cousin Rachel's upcoming wedding. The wedding was 3 weeks away, and Amanda had been talking about it since the invitation arrived. She was going to be a bridesmaid. She had a dress the color of soft lavender hanging in her closet, still wrapped in plastic, and she checked on it most evenings, the way some people check their phones. "You excited?" asked her manager, Tom, sliding a tray of dough toward the proofing rack. "I'm going to get my hair done," Amanda said, wiping flour from her hands. "Rachel said everybody in the wedding gets their hair done together, at a real salon, with a chair that goes up and down." Tom smiled. "That sounds nice. I already called 3 places," she added, though this wasn't quite true yet. She planned to call 3 places on her lunch break, methodically, the way she planned everything. Amanda lived with her mother, Karen Whitfield, in a small brick house on the east side of Tulsa, the kind of neighborhood where neighbors still waved from their porches and knew each other's dogs by name. Karen was 54, a school administrative assistant who had raised Amanda alone since her husband passed when Amanda was 11. Karen had spent years fighting for Amanda's independence, insisting she take the city bus alone once she'd learned the route, insisting she keep her job at the bakery even during the hardest years, insisting the world treat her daughter as a full person and not a problem to be managed. Most days the world listened. Most days Amanda's life looked like anyone else's. Coffee in the morning, work, phone calls with friends, plans for the weekend. It was easy, on the good days, to forget that the world could still surprise you with its cruelty. That Tuesday afternoon, on her break, Amanda sat in the small employee room with her phone and a list she had written in her careful, rounded handwriting. Salon options for Rachel's wedding. 3 names, 3 phone numbers, copied from a wedding planning group her cousin had added her to. The first number belonged to a salon called Elegance Studio downtown, with a glass storefront and a 5-star rating online. Amanda dialed it with the same care she used for everything. "Elegance Studio, this is Diane." "Hi, my name is Amanda. I want to book a hair appointment for a wedding. My cousin is getting married." "Wonderful. Congratulations to her. What date were you thinking?" Amanda gave the date. There was a pause on the line, brief but noticeable, the kind of pause Amanda had learned through years of practice, though she rarely let herself think about it directly, often meant something was about to change. And this would be, "I'm sorry, can I ask, do you have any particular needs I should know about? Any conditions?" Amanda hesitated. She had answered this question before, in different forms, at different places. "I have Down syndrome," she said. "But I just want a haircut and maybe some curls." Another pause, longer this time. "Let me check with our stylist," Diane said, and the hold music started before Amanda could respond. She waited 2 minutes, watching the clock on the break room wall, humming under her breath to fill the silence. When Diane came back, her voice had changed, polite but tighter, the warmth drained out of it like water from a cracked cup. "I'm so sorry, but we're actually fully booked that whole week. I should have checked before I asked." "Oh," Amanda said. "Okay, thank you anyway." She hung up and looked at her list. One name crossed off, in her mind if not on paper. She told herself it didn't mean anything. Salons got busy, weddings were popular in the summer. She picked up her phone again, dialed the second number, and told herself the next call would go differently. It did not. By the end of the week, Amanda had called 5 salons, not 3, adding names as each call ended the same way it began. Polite interest, a pause at the mention of Down syndrome, and then some version of the same excuse. Fully booked, short-staffed, a stylist on maternity leave. The reasons changed, but the shape of the rejection never did. She told her mother about it on Thursday night, sitting at the kitchen table with a bowl of cereal she wasn't really eating. "They're all full," Amanda said. "Every single one." Karen set down the dish towel she'd been holding. She had spent 27 years learning to read the particular quiet in her daughter's voice that meant something had hurt her more than she was willing to say outright. "Full? Or did they say something else?" "They asked if I had any conditions. I told them about my Down syndrome. Then they were full." Karen felt something tighten behind her ribs, a familiar, exhausting anger she had carried since Amanda was small, since the pediatrician who spoke only to her and never to Amanda, since the middle school that tried to keep Amanda out of regular classes, since 100 smaller moments that added up to the same message: "You don't quite belong here." "Give me the names," Karen said. "I'll call myself." "Mom, it's fine. Give me the names, Amanda." Karen called Elegant Studio the next morning, posing as a customer, inquiring about general availability for the same week Amanda had requested. The receptionist, a different one this time, offered her 3 open slots without hesitation. Karen thanked her, hung up, and sat very still in her kitchen for a long moment before calling her sister. They lied to her, Karen said. They just didn't want to deal with her. Word moved quickly through the family, the way it does when an old wound gets reopened. Rachel, the bride, called Amanda in tears, apologizing for something that wasn't her fault, insisting they'd find somewhere, insisting Amanda would still be in the wedding, no matter what her hair looked like. Amanda appreciated the kindness, but it didn't fix the hollow feeling that had settled in her chest. The specific loneliness of being told, without anyone quite saying it out loud, that she was too complicated for an ordinary Tuesday. She tried 2 more salons the following week. Patricia Reed, who owned a boutique salon called the Style Room, was warmer on the phone than the others, chatting easily about the wedding, about lavender dresses, about curling techniques, until Amanda mentioned Down syndrome, at which point Patricia's enthusiasm cooled into a series of vague concerns about liability and the right fit for our team. Sandra Cole, at a place called Hairline Studio, didn't even bother with liability. She simply said her stylists weren't trained for that kind of client and wished Amanda luck. 3 salons, 3 doors, each closing a little differently, but landing in the same place. What Amanda didn't know, what none of the Whitfields knew yet, was that Karen's frustration hadn't stayed contained to phone calls and kitchen tables. On the Friday after Sandra Cole's call, Karen had written a long, unfiltered post in a local Tulsa community group online, describing what had happened to her daughter in plain, angry language. She hadn't expected much from it. She'd expected maybe a few sympathetic comments, a few strangers agreeing that it was a shame. She had not expected Michael Sullivan to see it. Michael was 46 years old, a former army mechanic who now ran an auto repair shop on the edge of downtown Tulsa and served as president of a motorcycle club called the Steel Guardians. 60 local riders, mostly veterans and long-time Tulsa residents, known around the city for charity rides, toy drives at Christmas, and a habit of showing up, uninvited but welcome, wherever someone needed backup. Michael's youngest brother had been born with cerebral palsy, and Michael had spent his whole life watching people underestimate him, dismiss him, or simply look away. He knew that particular kind of quiet cruelty by heart. He read Karen's post twice. Then he picked up his phone and typed a message into the Steel Guardians group chat. "We need to talk about something." By the following Monday, Amanda had stopped mentioning the wedding at work. Tom noticed the change first. The humming had stopped, and she moved through her shift with a quiet efficiency that felt more like duty than joy. When he asked if she was all right, she gave him a small, practiced smile and said she was fine, the same way she'd learned to say it to teachers, doctors, and strangers her whole life. At home, the weight of it sat heavier. Amanda had started looking at the lavender dress differently, not with anticipation, but with a kind of dread, imagining herself standing next to Rachel and the other bridesmaids, with hair no one had bothered to style, feeling like the piece that didn't quite match the picture. "Maybe I'll just wear it down," she told her mother one evening. "It's fine. It doesn't matter that much." Karen recognized the sentence for what it was. Not acceptance, but surrender, the quiet retreat Amanda had learned to make whenever the world pushed back too many times in a row. It was the same tone she'd used at 9 years old when kids on the playground wouldn't let her join a game, the same tone from 16 when a boy she liked stopped talking to her after finding out about her diagnosis. Karen had spent years trying to make sure her daughter never had to learn that particular resignation. And every time it resurfaced, it broke something in her all over again. "It matters," Karen said. "It's your cousin's wedding, and you deserve to feel beautiful in it just like anybody else. We'll find someone." But Karen didn't know how many places were left to try. She'd exhausted the salons within a reasonable drive, and each rejection had chipped away a little more of her patience without giving her any new direction. She lay awake that night, composing arguments she would never get the chance to make, replaying Diane Foster's careful, apologetic voice, Patricia Reed's talk of liability, Sandra Cole's blunt dismissal. She didn't know that 3 miles away, in the back room of Sullivan's Auto Repair, Michael Sullivan was sitting across a folding table from a woman named Nicole Bennett. Nicole was 38, and owned a small salon on the north side of town called Bennett & Co.'s, a place with mismatched chairs, a second-hand couch in the waiting area, and a client list built almost entirely on word of mouth. She had grown up with a younger sister who had an intellectual disability, and she had built her salon, in part, as a place where nobody would ever be made to feel like a burden for existing. She had read Karen's post the same day Michael had, shared by a mutual friend, and had already decided quietly that she would reach out to the family herself. Michael got there first. "I don't want to make this into a spectacle," Nicole said when Michael explained why he'd come. "I just want to cut her hair, that's it. That's the whole thing." "It doesn't have to be complicated," Michael agreed. "But I think there's something bigger here. 3 places told this girl she wasn't worth their time. I think Tulsa ought to know what that looks like, and what the opposite looks like, too." Nicole studied him for a long moment, weighing the risk of turning a private kindness into something public, something that might feel more like a performance than a haircut. "If we do this," she finally said, "it's about her, not about the bikes, not about making a point. Her." "Agreed," Michael said, "but I promise you, once my club hears what happened to that girl, they're going to want to be there. That's just who they are." He wasn't wrong. By Wednesday evening, 60 riders had already said yes. By Thursday, word had spread to 2 neighboring clubs, then a third. Michael watched the numbers climb in his phone with a mixture of pride and disbelief, texting Nicole updates as they came in, both of them beginning to understand that what had started as a simple offer to cut a young woman's hair was turning into something neither of them had fully planned. Karen almost didn't answer the call from an unknown Tulsa number on Friday afternoon. She'd grown wary of unfamiliar calls, half expecting another salon with another excuse. But something made her pick up. "Mrs. Whitfield? My name is Nicole Bennett. I own a salon on the north side, Bennett and Company. I saw a post about your daughter, and I would be honored, genuinely honored, to do her hair for the wedding, whenever works for her." Karen sat down slowly at the kitchen table, phone pressed hard against her ear, unsure for a moment whether she'd heard correctly. "You're serious? Completely serious? I'd love to meet Amanda, hear what she's picturing, and make sure she feels exactly the way she wants to feel walking into that wedding." Karen thanked her more times than was probably necessary before hanging up, then sat alone in the kitchen for several minutes, letting herself feel, for the first time in weeks, something like relief. When Amanda got home from work, Karen told her the news carefully, watching her daughter's face shift from caution to disbelief to a slow, blooming smile that Karen hadn't seen in almost a month. "A real salon," Amanda said, "with a chair that goes up and down?" "I would bet on it," Karen said, laughing for the first time in weeks herself. What neither of them knew was that Michael Sullivan had spent the week turning a private act of kindness into something much larger. The Steel Guardians charity rides usually drew 40 or 50 bikes. This one, shared through club networks across 3 states, discussed on local radio after a reporter caught wind of it, had grown into something else entirely. By Saturday morning, the morning of Amanda's appointment, Michael stood outside Bennett & Co. In the grey Oklahoma dawn, watching a line of motorcycles stretch down the block and around the corner, engines idling in a low, steady rumble that seemed to vibrate up through the sidewalk itself. 300 riders. Veterans, mechanics, nurses, teachers, retirees, people who had never met Amanda Whitfield, who knew nothing about her, except that she had been turned away 3 times for something she couldn't control, and had decided, each in their own way, that this would not be the story that defined her. When Karen's car turned onto the street just after 9, Amanda pressed her face to the window, certain for a moment she'd misread the scene. Mom, look." Karen slowed the car, her hands tightening on the wheel, her throat closing around words she couldn't quite form. Rows of motorcycles lined both sides of the street, riders standing beside them in leather vests, some holding small handwritten signs, "Welcome, Amanda." Others simply watching the car approach with quiet, steady attention. "Are they here for me?" Amanda asked. "I think they are, baby." As the car pulled up to the salon, Michael Sullivan stepped forward, removed his sunglasses, and walked toward the passenger door with the same calm, unhurried respect he might have shown a visiting dignitary. He opened the door himself. "Amanda," he said, "I'm Michael. We heard what happened to you, and we wanted you to know Tulsa's got your back. Every single one of us is here because we think you deserve exactly what everybody else gets, no more, no less. You ready to go get your hair done?" For a moment, Amanda couldn't speak at all. She looked at the line of engines, the leather jackets, the strangers who had given up their Saturday morning for her, and felt something inside her chest loosen that had been tight for weeks. "Yes," she finally said, her voice thick. "I'm ready." The 300 riders parted into 2 lines, forming a corridor from the car to the salon door, and Amanda walked through it slowly, Karen at her side, both of them wiping at their eyes, surrounded by the low rumble of engines and the quiet applause of strangers who had decided together that no one should have to earn the right to be treated with basic decency. Inside Bennett & Co., but the noise of the street faded into something softer, The hum of hair dryers, the murmur of the small radio Nicole always kept on, the particular hush of a place built for care rather than spectacle. Nicole met Amanda at the door with both hands outstretched, not for a handshake, but simply to hold Amanda's for a moment, the way old friends greet each other. "There she is," Nicole said. "Come on back. I've got the good chair reserved just for you." The chair did, in fact, go up and down, and Amanda tested it twice before settling in, watching herself in the mirror with the particular attention of someone finally being seen the way she'd hoped to be seen all along. Nicole worked slowly, asking Amanda questions about the wedding, about Rachel, about what beautiful meant to her, not rushing, not performing, simply doing the job she loved for a client she was genuinely glad to have. Outside, the 300 riders didn't leave. They stood in loose clusters along the sidewalk, talking quietly among themselves, some drinking coffee from a nearby shop, a few local news vans setting up at a respectful distance. Michael stayed near the door the entire time, not because Amanda needed protecting from anything inside the salon, but because he understood that showing up sometimes means simply staying. Karen sat in the small waiting area, watching her daughter through the mirror's reflection, feeling the particular ache of a parent who has spent years absorbing small cruelties on her child's behalf, finally allowed to exhale. "She's been talking about this haircut for a month," Karen told Nicole quietly at one point. "I didn't know if I'd get to see her this happy about it." "She's going to look incredible," Nicole said. "But honestly, I think she already does." 2 hours later, Amanda stood from the chair, her hair styled into soft curls that framed her face exactly the way she'd pictured, and turned toward the mirror with an expression Karen would remember for the rest of her life. Not just happiness, but a kind of quiet vindication, the look of someone who had been told no enough times to doubt whether she deserved a yes, and had finally gotten one anyway. When Amanda stepped back outside, the riders erupted into applause, engines revving in a wave of celebratory noise that rolled down the block. Amanda laughed, startled and delighted, waving at the crowd like she'd just won something important. Because, in a way, she had. The story reached local news that evening, then state news the next day, then spread further still. Not because 300 motorcycles made for a striking image, though they did, but because the story underneath was simple enough for anyone to understand. A young woman had been told 3 separate times that she wasn't worth the trouble, and a community of strangers had decided together to prove otherwise. At Rachel's wedding 3 weeks later, Amanda stood among the bridesmaids in her lavender dress, her curls holding perfectly through the ceremony. And when the photographer gathered the wedding party for pictures, she stood tall, unhesitating, exactly where she belonged. Nicole Bennett's salon saw a wave of new clients in the following months, many of them families who had faced similar rejections elsewhere and finally found a place that didn't flinch. Michael Sullivan and the Steel Guardians kept riding, kept showing up, adding Amanda's Day informally to their yearly calendar of causes worth defending. And Amanda, back at the bakery on the following Tuesday, hummed while she worked, sliding trays in and out of the ovens with her usual steady precision, occasionally touching the ends of her hair as if to make sure the memory was real. It was. Some doors close for no good reason. But sometimes, when enough people decide to stand together, an entirely different door opens, one wide enough for everyone.